I want to tell you about something that happened to me a few years ago when I was driving home late one night. It's something I'll never be able to forget, because to this day, I'm still not sure what it was that I saw. It was late November, which meant it was getting colder, darker, and eerily quiet at night where I lived. I was driving back from a late shift at work, and the drive usually took me about an hour. More than half of that drive was down old country roads, no streetlights, few houses, and rarely another car in sight. The kind of roads where the trees lean in from the sides, swallowing the moonlight, and the only sound for miles is the hum of your engine and your tires rolling over cracked pavement. As tired as I was, I liked the peacefulness of it. But that night felt different. I had been on the road for maybe 20 minutes when I saw something up ahead, illuminated faintly in the glow of my headlights. At first, I thought it was just a deer standing at the edge of the road. That wouldn't have been out of the ordinary. Deer cross those roads all the time. But once I got closer, I realized it wasn't an animal at all. It looked like a person. They were standing completely still, just barely off the shoulder of the road. I slowed down, squinting through my windshield, expecting to see someone flagging me down for help, but the person didn't move an inch. As my headlights washed over them, I could see their figure clearly. It was a woman. She was wearing what looked like a light-colored dress, but it was dirty, torn in places, and her long black hair hung wetly over her face. She wasn't signaling for me to stop. She wasn't even looking at me. She was just standing there, facing the road, with her hands hanging limply at her sides. I can't explain why, but my chest tightened immediately. Something about her presence was wrong. I drove by slowly, keeping my eyes glued to my rearview mirror. For a moment, I thought she might turn her head or lift an arm, but she didn't. She just stood there, getting swallowed back into the dark as my car rolled on. I tried to shake it off, telling myself maybe it was someone who got stranded, or a girl playing some cruel joke. But the more I thought about her, the less sense it made. First, there were no cars pulled over nearby. And second, no one just stands that still in complete silence. I reached down and turned up the radio, trying to distract myself. But the road stretched on endlessly, and I couldn't stop glancing at my mirrors. That's when things got worse. About 10 minutes later, I saw something again. Up ahead, standing on the side of the road, another figure. My stomach sank instantly. It was her. Same dress, same hair, same exact posture. I slammed on the brakes, my car slowing to a crawl as I stared ahead in disbelief. There was no way I should have seen her again. I hadn't passed any side road she could have taken, not unless she cut straight through dense forest in freezing weather and somehow made it ahead of my car. But there she was. This time, I didn't slow down. I gripped the steering wheel, pressed my foot harder on the gas, and blasted past her. I didn't dare look at her as I passed, though in my peripheral vision I thought I saw her head tilt slightly. My heart pounded furiously in my chest. I didn't know if it was a prank or something much worse. After another stretch of silence, about 5 or 6 more minutes down the road, I forced myself to breathe. Maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me. Maybe it wasn't the same person at all, just someone else who coincidentally looked similar. But then, I came around another bend, and my headlights revealed something that made every hair on my body stand on end. She was in the road, not standing off to the side, but directly in the middle of the cracked pavement, standing perfectly still, facing me as if she had been waiting. I reacted too quickly, swerving my wheel so hard that my tires squealed. I nearly lost control before I corrected it and sped around her, my body jerking in panic. My hands shook violently as I gripped the wheel. My breaths came short and ragged. As I passed, I couldn't help but snap my head to the side, and what I saw, I will never unsee. The woman's face, her hair had parted just enough, and underneath was a pale, lifeless face. eyes impossibly wide. But they weren't focused on me, not exactly. They looked like they were staring through me, or maybe right past me, into something I couldn't see. Her mouth was open, but not like she was screaming. It was stretched too far, unnatural, like a mask of silent terror frozen in place. I floored it, driving faster than I ever had on those roads. The only thing I could think about was making it home alive. But the road seemed longer than ever. For every stretch I passed, I expected to see her again. My headlights spilled forward into emptiness. But I couldn't shake the claustrophobic feeling that at any moment she'd appear again, closer than before. Then, just as I felt I might finally escape, something happened that nearly made me crash again. There was a loud, sharp knock on my passenger side window. I was going 65 at least, maybe more. And yet I heard it clear as day. A hard tap, like someone's knuckle rapping against the glass. I whipped my head to the right, but there was nothing there. Nothing except blurred trees rushing past. My skin crawled all over. I nearly pulled over, but something deep in my gut screamed at me not to stop no matter what I heard or saw. So I just kept driving. When I finally pulled into my driveway, I sat in my car for what felt like forever. My knuckles were white from gripping the wheel, and my whole body trembled uncontrollably. I gathered just enough courage to step out of the car and make a run for my front door. The first thing I did was lock every door and window. Then I sat in my living room with the lights on, waiting, listening. That night, I barely slept. Every creak in the house, every gust of wind outside made me flinch. And when I did start to drift off, I dreamed of that pale face, her hair hanging down, those eyes too wide to look human. I don't know who or what she was. I've told myself 100 times it had to have been a trick of my imagination, maybe compounded by exhaustion. But in my bones, I know that's not true. She was real. And she wasn't just on that road. She was following me. I haven't driven those country roads at night again since then. And if I ever find myself forced to, you can be sure I won't be going alone. Until last summer, I thought terrifying stories about haunted roads were just things people made up to pass time around bonfires or on sleepovers. But what happened to me on Old Windham Road changed all that. I've always been a night driver sometimes. There's nothing more peaceful than an empty road and a quiet sky above. But that night, what I wanted was just to get to my friend's house across town. Nothing more. It was late July. The kind of night where the air had finally cooled down after a long, humid day, and just the sound of cicadas buzzing through the trees. The normal route to my friend Blake's house was closed for repaving, so my phone's GPS rerouted me through a backcountry road I'd barely heard of. Old Windham Road. The name itself didn't mean anything to me at the time, but the moment I turned down it, something felt off. My headlights swept over dense woods on both sides. Trees knotted together thickly, their branches arching overhead and swallowing any light. The asphalt was cracked and narrow, barely wide enough for 2 cars, lined by a shallow ditch that disappeared into overgrown grass. Windham Road didn't just feel old, it felt forsaken. I shrugged it off. Old roads always creep me out. After a minute or two, I lost my radio signal, so the only sound was my car's engine and the gravel hitting the wheel wells. I pushed the high beams, trying to see farther into the blackness ahead. That's when I noticed the first thing out of place. An old mailbox, bent and rusted, with thick red paint peeling in slashes. Hanging off the bottom was something white, maybe a grocery bag caught by the wind. I shook off the jittery feeling and kept going. As I drove deeper, the woods just grew thicker. The darkness eating up the yellow line down the center of the road. That's when I saw him. A man, bathed in my high beams, standing at the shoulder where the ditch met the road. He looked middle-aged, with a stained jacket, jeans, and a baseball cap slung low so his face was shadowed. But what struck me was his posture. He wasn't flagging me down. but just standing, staring directly at my car. My instinct was to slow, but everything in me screamed not to. The way he faced me, straight on as if he knew I'd come this way, unsettled me more than I expected. When I was almost past, I saw his hands. Both were clenched tight, white-knuckled, and his shirt was splattered with something dark. I pressed harder on the pedal, passing him as fast as I dared. Seconds later, I checked my rearview mirror, squinting into the darkness, and saw nothing. He was just gone. Not walking away, not receding from view, gone, like a trick of the imagination. But I was sure he'd been there. For another mile or so, I tried soothing myself, telling myself it was late. I was tired, seeing things that weren't there. But now I felt eyes on me, like something moving just beyond the beam of my headlights, flitting through the trees. A stretch of fog suddenly drifted across the road, the kind you only see in horror movies, low and swirling. My mind began to race, conjuring all kinds of dark stories I'd heard about roads like this. Then, there were the sounds. Not the usual crickets or wind, but something harsher, a kind of shuffling and scratching, like claws or nails on the bark. I rolled my windows up tighter, but that only seemed to make my car feel smaller, and the forest closer. That's when my phone buzzed. The screen read, "No service." The GPS navigation cut out, and the map just went blank. For the first time in years, I felt truly alone. My hands tensed on the wheel as I rounded a tight bend. Standing directly on the yellow line, in the center of the road, was a little girl. Her dress was old-fashioned, tattered at the hem, and dirt-stained. She had hair so dark, it seemed to absorb the very light of my headlights. I slammed the brakes and skidded to a stop inches from her. My heart was in my throat. She just stared at me, wide-eyed, her pupils reflecting the light in a way I will never forget. Then, she smiled, but it was wrong. Too wide, too many teeth showing. The sort of smile that makes your blood run cold. "Do you need help?" I managed to croak out, not knowing what else to do. But she didn't respond. She lifted one arm, bone thin, and pointed into the woods to my left. Then her hand curled into a fist, and she vanished. 1 second she was there, and the next she was gone, as if she had never existed at all. I lurched forward, hyperventilating, barely keeping my foot on the gas as I moved away from that spot as quickly as I could, blood pounding in my ears. My radio flickered back to life, but it wasn't music or talk. It was static, interlaced with faint whispers. My first instinct was to turn it off, but I couldn't make myself reach for the knob. Instead, I just gripped the wheel so tightly my knuckles muscled white. A few minutes ahead, the road forked a T intersection that looked ancient. The signposts so rusted the names had faded away. My GPS was dead, so I guessed and took a right, figuring it would bring me back toward the main road eventually. As soon as I turned, my headlights flashed over a battered sign nailed to a tree. "Private road, no trespassing." Beneath it, someone had spray painted "Leave now" in jagged red letters, but there was no room to turn around. So I pressed on, speed creeping up as my nerves frayed. It's hard to explain, but suddenly, the trees seemed to close in, even tighter than before, their branches snagging at my side mirrors. The fog thickened, and the whispers on the radio grew louder and more insistent, overlapping voices, undulating and hissing, just at the edge of understanding. Every few seconds I caught flashes in the underbrush, quick movement, human shapes gone before my eyes could focus. I tried to tell myself it was just deer or raccoons, but by now, I was convinced I wasn't alone on that road. About a quarter mile ahead, a light appeared, a single headlamp, glaring bright through the fog. A truck was barreling straight toward me in my lane, engine roaring. I veered hard right, my tires shrieking as I dropped into the shallow ditch, grass whipping against my doors. The truck passed inches away, its horn blaring inhumanly loud. shaking my car to its frame. But as it passed, my headlights lit up the cab inside. There was no one at the wheel. The truck, carrying itself, hurtling off into the mist. I scrambled back onto the pavement, adrenaline flooding my veins. I looked back, expecting to see its taillights disappearing in the fog, but nothing. The beam simply faded, swallowed by the woods. After what felt like forever, I saw up ahead an old bridge, planks warped and railings missing in places. The only way forward was to cross it. I paused, eyeing the water beneath, black and stagnant, barely reflecting the headlights. The bridge looked ready to collapse, but I was too shaken to go back. I eased onto it, the wood groaning under my tires. In the center, something skittered across my hood so quick and spindly, I couldn't get a clear look. Just the frantic movement and clicking of clawed feet. It vanished over the side, and ripples disturbed the inky water below. Just as I made it to the other side, something landed with a thud in my trunk. The car dipped sharply, pitching me forward. I floored it, cab shaking violently, as something heavy thumped and rolled in the back. Ahead, the road was hemmed in by a crumbling stone wall to one side, an impenetrable forest to the other. I kept glancing at my rearview mirror, but the darkness behind was absolute. At the next curve, a figure appeared on the roadside, waving a hitchhiker, hunched and ragged, thumb out. I sped up, heart pounding, but as I passed, the figure's face twisted into a grin, and the eyes followed me, glowing with unnatural hunger. I kept driving, listening to a sharp, high-pitched whine start to rise in my cabin, as if every warning system in my car were about to go off in unison. Even worse, my own breath now visible, spilling cold fog onto my windshield. I was desperate for any sign of civilization, and finally, my headlights caught the outline of a house old, with peeling paint and a sagging porch, one solitary bulb burning on the stoop. Part of me screamed to just keep driving, but my fuel gauge was perilously low, and my hands were shaking too badly to trust myself behind the wheel much longer. I pulled over, cut the engine, and sat listening. Nothing but the churning whispers from the radio and my own frantic heartbeat. Against my better judgment, I stepped onto the porch and knocked. The bulb above me flickered violently, then blew out, plunging me into blackness. From inside came slow, dragging footsteps. The door creaked open and revealed nothing. Just a hallway, long and shadowed, lined with ancient photos whose features blurred as I stared too long. I called out, and only my echo replied. The house felt impossibly cold, and the boards beneath me groaned as if weighted by unseen bodies. Then, a face loomed out of the darkness, at the end of the hall, pale, bruised, with wide, rage-filled eyes. I bolted back to the car, keys fumbling in my hands, convinced that thing was right behind me. I revved the engine and screeched away, heart hammering, headlights throwing twisted shapes through the woods. But no matter how far I drove, the road wouldn't end. The same mailbox, the same hitchhiker, the same horrors looping endlessly. I don't remember how I finally made it back to Main Street. One moment, the woods stretched on forever. The next, I burst through the tree line and into familiar lights and roads, gasping and sweaty and terrified. Even now, months later, I'm not sure I ever really left Old Windham Road. The nightmares haven't stopped. Sometimes, I see faces in my mirrors, reflections that don't belong, and every odd thump in the night makes my blood run cold. All because I took a detour I never should have. So if your GPS ever tells you to take Old Windham Road, keep driving past, no matter how lost you are. Some places don't want to be found, and some roads only let you leave part of yourself behind. If there's any place I'd call cursed, It's the old Gallow stretch highway. I wouldn't have believed it myself until the night I was forced to take it. A night that clawed its way into my nightmares and never let go. The stretch has a reputation in my county. 18 miles of lifeless pavement, hugged tight by black woods, with no exits, no cell service, and only the occasional flicker of derelict streetlights. Most nights, it simply sits empty, choked with drifting fog. But those who've driven it alone after midnight report things they hesitate to share in the daylight. I'd always laughed off those warnings. I used to be a skeptic, the kind of person who blamed every ghost story on exhausted imaginations and tricks of the light. That changed after last March. It started on a Friday night, the kind that tempts you to stretch a hangout late into the dark hours. I was leaving my friend's place after a movie marathon, my mind buzzing from too much caffeine. I'd planned to take the interstate home, but a sudden police detour funneled me toward Gallow Stretch instead. I remember staring up at the green sign as I turned. Gallow Stretch, no services, next 18 miles. The radio stuttered as I pulled on, then cut out with a pop of static. My phone still had battery, but the service bars vanished, just past the first mile marker. The woods shut me in quickly after that. The trees arched overhead, gnarled and leafless like skeletal fingers. The road under my tires was cracked and pitted, as if time and weather were trying to swallow it. I tried turning on a podcast, but all I got was buzzing. Even the moon seemed to slip behind clouds as I merged into the eternal black that pressed on all sides. Around the 3rd mile, my headlights caught a shape on the shoulder, a possum, maybe, or the suggestion of one. Still, I hit the lock on my doors by instinct. It's hard to explain how quickly you lose your sense of direction on that road. Signs don't mark the miles. The GPS can't anchor you to reality. You drive and drive, and the fog gets thicker, headlights slicing through it in twin tunnels. That's when the real fear set in. My gas gauge suddenly dipped, blinking empty much too soon. The car started to stutter like the tank had been bled dry. The engine coughing, the lights on the dash flickering. My fingers turned slick with sweat as I coasted to a crawl. "Please, not here," I muttered, glancing out into the unbroken tree line. It wasn't fear of breaking down, at least, not the regular kind. The darkness felt predatory, watching, hungry for any mistake. Sure enough, a half-mile ahead, the engine cut with a pitiful whine. I rolled to a full stop on the edge, and the very silence felt alive. The clock on the dash froze at 1:13 a.m. I'd just fumbled for my flashlight when a pale glow flickered in my side mirror. A figure stood about 20 yards back, perched on the line between road and trees. I blinked hard, but she didn't move. A woman in an outmoded white dress, old-fashioned, with dark hair matted over her face and arms hanging awkwardly. I told myself it was a trick of moonlight or fog. But then, I noticed the silence, so total it rang in my ears. No crickets, no wind, no occasional car in the opposite lane. With my heart hammering, I locked my doors and hunched down, phone in hand despite the no service icon. I didn't want to look, but curiosity almost burned worse than fear. I glanced outside again. She was a little closer now, halfway up the shoulder. She never walked. She just got nearer every time I blinked or looked away, her posture broken like her limbs hung only by strings. Suddenly, static from the radio burst alive for barely a second. A voice, soft but ragged, whispered through the hum, "Get out of the car." For a second I thought it was just my mind. But when I looked back, the woman now stood only a car's length away, her hair slithering over her face. Then she smiled. It wasn't a normal smile. Her mouth split far too wide, bleeding into her cheeks, impossibly long. A series of sharp thumps knocked at my trunk. 1, 2, 3. The car rocked as if something heavy settled on the back end. The headlights flickered, then died. I could barely breathe. I fumbled for the flashlight, swinging it toward the rear window. The woman was gone, replaced by a hand pressed against the glass. The palm was slick, smeared with some dark substance, and as I stared, long bony fingers curled and tapped twice. I screamed, backing away until I hit the driver's door. Then I saw another figure outside, a man this time, impossibly tall, a hat shadowing where a face should be. He glided up to my passenger door and bent down, as if peering in, breath fogging the glass. His eyes glowed faintly, a foxfire green. I couldn't move, but then, the trunk thudded again, and the hand disappeared. Both figures seemed to slide away or dissolve into the mist. For a while, I was frozen there, not daring to move. Then, impossibly, the radio sparked up once more. A warped lullaby crooned through the static. Round and round, the driver goes. Where he stops, nobody knows. The trees seemed to pulse with the beat branches swinging like dancers' arms. I saw more shapes now, dozens, then hundreds, packed between the trunks. Their eyes shined blank white, all staring at my car, unmoving. A cold seemed to bleed through the glass, frosting the inside. My breaths puffed out in clouds, even though it was early spring. When I pressed the starter, the car sputtered but caught. I floored it, desperate to outrun the nightmare. But the road only stretched, new twists and turns appearing. No sign of the old mile markers, or even the moon above. I had no sense of time. My phone's clock refused to change. At one point, headlights flashed in my rear view, bright and distant. But for every mile I drove, they stayed exactly the same distance behind, never gaining, never dropping. The only thing that changed was the passenger seat. For a split second, I saw a figure there, a little boy, staring straight ahead. His skin was deathly gray, eyes hollow but wet, as if he'd been crying forever. Then, he was gone, as if wiped away when I blinked. Desperation clawed my throat. That's when I realized I was low on oxygen, gasping for air, my vision hazy. I tried cracking a window, but the glass wouldn't budge. The air turned stale, thick, full of old perfume and the coppery scent of blood. I swerved to the side of the road, stumbling out onto gravel. The woods were totally silent, but now I heard footsteps, soft, uneven, circling just out of view. A young woman's voice floated through the trees, singing that same tune from the radio. I thought I saw a lantern bobbing up and down among the trunks. Then 2, then 10. They all drifted closer, and in each glow, a face different person, same dead eyes. They surrounded me in a silent ring. The tallest one, cloak billowing, raised a finger and pointed behind me. Unable to help myself, I looked and saw my own car, with me still inside, slumped over the wheel. My chest froze as I realized the figures had grown more solid, their smiles sharper, their hands reaching. For a moment, I felt a cold touch on my arm, and the world spun. I lost track of where I was, what was happening, past, present, and future, all stitched together by sheer terror. Somehow, I awoke slouched over my car's wheel, parked neatly outside my own house in broad daylight. My phone was fully charged, the clock almost noon. All the grime and condensation was gone. Later, when I checked my car's dash cam, I found only 45 minutes of footage, mostly static with short flickers showing pale glimpses, faces pressed damply against the window, hands oozing down the glass before vanishing. That wasn't the end. For weeks, the lullaby haunted my sleep. My windows would fog up from the inside, revealing long fingerprints even when the glass was dry. Every now and then, as I drive at night, I think I see a pale woman in the rear view, waiting on the edge of memory and darkness, ready to beckon me back down Gallow stretch. So next time you see a detour sign at midnight, turn around. Don't let curiosity drive you where you might never really return. If that story left you with chills, like, comment, and hit subscribe. There's always another turn in the road and more stories waiting in the dark.